The world has been obsessed with this waterway for over a century. It runs through Egypt, is just about 120 miles or 193 kilometers long, and connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. They call it the lifeline of global trade. Every day, hundreds of tankers and cargo ships run through it. The Suez Canal, but even after more than 100 years, the question still remains, who controls the Suez Canal? Let's find out. It all began back in 1854 when Napoleon Bonaparte suggested the idea of digging a canal through Egypt. That's when French military leader Ferdinand de Lesseps started the project, which would connect Europe to Asia. After 10 years of work, on November 17, 1869, the Suez Canal was finally opened. The celebrations were grand. There was fireworks, there was champagne. Even Ottoman Sultan Abdulaziz sent a warship to celebrate. It was a moment of pride for France, for Europe. But Egypt had other plans. In 1875, Egyptian ruler Khedive Ismail offered to buy the canal from France. France refused. But in 1876, Ismail bought 17,000 shares in the Suez Canal Company, giving him a controlling interest. Soon, things took a turn. Ismail died and his son Tawfiq took over. He was pro-British and signed a deal making Britain responsible for Egypt's defense. This deal would later become known as the infamous Capitulations Convention of 1881. Then came the British occupation of Egypt in 1882, followed by the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty of 1914, which gave Britain control over Egypt's foreign affairs and armed forces. Effectively, the canal was under British influence. It continued to be so till 1936, until the UK signed the treaty handing over the canal to the Egyptians. The ownership, however, was a little complicated. The company still owned 44% of the canal. The Egyptian government had 52%. And 4% was held by the Suez authorities themselves. The rest of the shares were scattered among local and international investors. Technically, yes, the canal was with the Egyptians, but they didn't have full control. And during World War II, Britain occupied the canal again, showing everyone that they could still squeeze the life out of the waterway. But in 1956, that finally changed. On July 26, 1956, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Overnight, the canal became Egyptian property. The government bought the shares from the company, from individuals, from wherever they could. They paid billions of pounds for this. Then, on December 29, 1956, the Egyptian government officially took control of the Suez Canal. Finally, it was 100% Egyptian. The joy was short-lived. In October 1956, Israel invaded the Sinai Peninsula. Their goal? Capture the canal. Along with them were Britain and France. What followed was known as the Suez Crisis. On October 29, 1956, Israeli forces crossed into the Sinai Peninsula. 2 days later, Britain and France dropped thousands of troops along the canal, along with paratroopers. The mission? Secure the canal and protect British and French nationals. At first, it seemed like a good plan. But within weeks, the UN brokered a ceasefire, forcing Israel to withdraw its forces. So in the end, who controlled the Suez Canal? No one. The fighting led to a political crisis. Britain and France realized they couldn't hold on to the canal. Their aim wasn't to control it anyway. It was to prevent it from falling into Soviet hands. As for Egypt, their vision of the canal was as a symbol of Arab nationalism, not a strategic tool. So the canal remained with Egypt, but at what cost? There were two main problems. First, the war damaged the canal's infrastructure. Ships could no longer use it freely. Second, the war impacted Egypt's economy. It left a legacy of distrust and scrutiny. The West kept a close eye on the canal. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula, blocking the southern access to the canal. Once again, the canal was rendered useless. But after the peace treaty in 1979, Egypt regained control of the canal, and it has remained that way since then. At least 12% of global maritime trade passes through the Suez Canal. Ships traveling between Europe and Asia must pass through here. The busiest stretches are the Great Bitter Lake, the Suez Lake and the sections near Port Said and Suez, This makes the Suez Canal one of the most important waterways in the world. But why? Because there are two routes to reach Asia from Europe. The first is the Strait of Gibraltar, the Mediterranean Sea, the Levant, and then the Suez Canal. The second route is much longer. It takes ships around the Cape of Good Hope. Until the Suez opened in 1869, this was the only route. That means there was no choice for European nations. They had to depend on the Cape route. With the Suez Canal, however, European countries had another option. They could travel east through a much shorter route, and this had a huge impact on the global economy. For starters, it saved time. Ships could make the journey faster and thus deliver cargo quicker. Second, it saved money. The distance was shorter, ships needed less fuel. It meant lower operation costs and higher profits. Third, it saved lives. The Cape route was risky. Storms, unpredictable weather, pirates, disease. The Suez route was much safer, and fourth, it helped grow economies. Trade was easier, cheaper. Countries could export and import more goods, boosting their economies. The Suez Canal became a key factor in the industrialization of Europe and the expansion of colonialism. Faster, cheaper trade meant more raw materials from colonies and more manufactured goods to sell them. Today, though, the story is different. Egypt owns and operates the Suez Canal. The country earns billions every year from transit fees, taxes, and employment. In fact, the canal accounts for 30% of Egypt's budget revenue and 5% of its GDP. It's critical to Egypt's financial stability. The canal also holds great strategic value for Egypt. It helps maintain Egypt's position as a global player. The canal gives Egypt leverage over global trade. And in times of crisis, the canal allows Egypt to project its power. Plus, the canal is a diplomatic tool. It helps Egypt attract foreign investment, forge alliances, and shape global politics. But beyond these impacts, the Suez Canal has shaped world history in ways big and small. For example, in 2021, a container ship blocked the canal. It was stuck sideways, halting trade for 6 days. Experts estimate that the blockage cost billions of dollars. It disrupted supply chains, inflated shipping rates, and threw markets into chaos. It was a wake-up call, reminding the world that global trade is fragile. One ship stuck and the entire world suffers. Then there are the environmental concerns. The canal cuts through Egypt's environmentally sensitive areas. It affects the local ecology, alters weather patterns, and increases air pollution. Plus, the canal poses a security risk. It runs through conflict zones, terrorist hotspots, and volatile regions. It raises questions about safety, protection, and responsibility. As we come to the end of our story, let's take a moment to appreciate the irony. Europe dreamed up the canal to boost its trade with Asia. Yet today, the canal itself is a victim of European rivalries. The Suez Canal, once a symbol of global connectivity, now stands as a testament to the enduring legacy of colonialism. Where the profits flow to the few, the control stays firmly in European hands, and the true cost is borne by generations. What do you think about the Suez Canal? How do you think the story will end? Let us know in the comments.